Afternoon, everyone. So, little impromptu stream. Not actually in line with what I was talking about last night, but I'm going to experiment with this anyway. So, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things really quickly. Basically, the racists are moving ahead, aren't they? We think about last summer, we had the race riots, and then they lasted for a few weeks. And then everyone was waiting with bated breath. Would the same things happen this year? Maybe the thing that stopped them is people do still remember what happened last year. Because remember, the racist thugs themselves, they're not large enough in numbers to be able to overwhelm the police, as happened last year. Unless they catch them off guard. But they were less likely to catch them off guard this year because they were waiting for them. So they needed large numbers of people who weren't themselves necessarily racist or anything. They just came along for a scrap or to cause trouble, public disorder, but finding themselves going to prison simply for being part of that assembly, probably not worth it. Probably not worth it. So we seem to have got away with that so far, but they're still, the way I just look at it is, are we any further ahead than we were last year in terms of far-right influence and stoking racial hatred in this country? I think no, we're further behind. And today, there were two things that happened. The first, I mean, let's talk about the sort of big one, which is there was... so there are hotels being used for some asylum seeker accommodation. It's not appropriate. It's not sensible to use hotels to house asylum seekers for numerous reasons. First of all, the hotels themselves are not, great for that. But secondly, it creates that visible problem. They get the stories in the media. We're paying for like 4-star hotels. People just come across on the boat. It all feeds into it. So you've got people who probably mean quite well. They're not the far right, but they get told in the news, someone just hops on a boat in northern France, comes to Britain, claims asylum, right? And they get put up in a 4-star hotel, which by the way, isn't happening at all. But when you can't talk to these, because if you say to these people, well, the reason they're coming across on the boat is because we don't have safe asylum routes. They don't believe that. And then if you say, well, you can't just say, well, we're not putting up in hotels, that'd be ridiculous. Like, well, we are putting some up in hotels, right? They're not like the Ritz or anything, but, we're putting them up in hotels. And that's caused by the Conservatives. So you've got this huge visible problem that needs knocking on the head. And Labour wants... Will I do a video on the recent thing in Epping? This is now. Sorry, I'm building up to it. It's now. And it is a headache for Labour, yes. So sorry, Mr. Balls just said that we do a video on the recent thing in Epping, not followed it closely, but can't work out whether it's a headache for Labour or not. Yeah, it is a headache for Labour. So anyway, the point is you've now got a lot of people who are perfectly well-meaning, they're not anti-asylum, but who think there's this massive problem because people are just coming across on the boat. They see those people as queue jumpers. They don't see them as genuine asylum seekers. That's ultimately the problem we have. And Labour could get rid of that, not quite overnight, but they could get rid of it quite quickly by processing in northern France, actually setting up a processing centre. I keep saying this. Anyway, so you have this. So one of these hotels, it's a council, and the reason, this is in Essex. So basically, it's a Reform UK council that was a Tory council. So the reason why this has happened here, for those who don't know, the asylum seekers were being housed there. The council went to court saying, we don't think they should be housed here because of safety concerns or whatever the hell. And a court has temporarily agreed with them. Now, that's not a definitive ruling. I'm going to come on to what the definitive ruling is likely to be, because it's likely to be a reversal of this, and I'll tell you why. But the reason why it's happening in Essex is because the political conditions are ripe for it. First of all, Essex is a Reform UK council, so of course a Reform UK council is going to try and absolve itself of any responsibilities for taking care of asylum seekers, right? That's natural. Secondly, they're going to get political cover from the Conservatives because they were the runners of that council and they want it back. And they think, just like Labour at the moment, that the way to appeal to those types of voter is by pushing the anti-asylum stuff themselves. So the Conservatives are more than happy to provide cover. Robert Jenrick's doing the same thing, even though Robert Jenrick was literally the immigration minister who set a lot of these things up. It's the Conservatives who create... So ask yourselves, why do we need the hotels? We need the hotels because the Conservatives, when they knew they were going to lose the election, started making a massive backlog of asylum claims. They just stopped processing them. So we don't actually have that many asylum claims, really. We've had more in recent years because there's been more refugees, like climate change and war is destroying more people's homes. So you're going to have an uptick in, but the number of claims you get is really very small, particularly compared to a lot of other countries. And so this hotel has won an injunction that says, yeah, okay, you probably shouldn't have to take these, have these asylum seekers in this hotel, citing various concerns. It's very likely to be reversed because this has happened before. This is not new. This has happened before. I can't remember exactly when it was. It was in the last few years when the Conservatives were in power. A different council, I can't remember when it was. It was also down south, I think. But a different council went to court to try and stop asylum seekers being housed in a particular hotel because of, issues. And the judge eventually, the definitive ruling was, yeah, we get that you've got issues, but these asylum seekers need to be housed. Now, in order to try and work out because obviously I'm not a judge or a lawyer, right? But in order to work out what the definitive ruling will be when it happens sometime later is, what happens to those asylum seekers? So the Tories have written to Yvette Cooper, the Conservatives have written to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, to say, so can you assure us that these asylum seekers being removed from this hotel are not going to be moved to another hotel or to any other housing that's needed by British people? And again, what do they want to happen to these asylum seekers? They don't care. They want them on the street, right? So it's like, but they have to go somewhere, and we have a legal duty to house them. So where do they go? Is it a council that's brought this forward rather than the hotel? Oh yeah, this is the hotel don't want to get rid of them. The hotel are getting money for them, right? In fact, this is one of the fiddles of the Conservatives. Quite a few of the contracts the government have to house asylum seekers in hotels were given to conservative donors who owned hotels. So quite a lot of them, and they were charging top dollar for it as well. It's a massive rip-off. So people are right to be upset that we're spending an absolute fortune on this sort of accommodation. But they need to understand that the reason for it is because the Tories allowed a massive backlog of asylum claims to get set up, which Labour have basically halved that backlog in a year. So over the next few years, they're going to get rid of the backlog to the point where it's just what is the normal annual amount of asylum claims, which should also mean that we don't need to use the hotels at some point. But this is a headache for Labour, going back to the original thing, because they've now got to work out where to put them. And wherever they go, what's going to happen now is, first of all, the far right have won today, right? They've won. They've said, so they're now going to encourage more people to get out. They're going to say to people, if you turn up, if you don't want these people in your community, turn out and protest peacefully, right? You don't set fire to the place, and you'll get your way. So they're now encouraging this. They're encouraging this racist NIMBYism. That's what this is. It's racist NIMBYism, right? They're encouraging it. And what they're going to do is they're going to follow those asylum seekers now. They're going to try and find out where they've gone. If they find that they've been put up in another hotel, they'll go to that other hotel. If they find that some of them have been found other accommodations, they'll say, there's British people on the streets because of these, right? So this is weaponising the far right. Now, from my fellow Doncaster. I've got to read this comment out, sorry. I'm from Doncaster originally, so am I. Live in St Leonard's near Hastings. Oh, I'm much closer to Doncaster still. If it wasn't for the asylum seekers, the hotels would be FC UK'd. Nobody uses them anymore. Everyone's Airbnb. So is that an option? So, well, this is the thing, isn't it? They're not being put up in like, if I book I have booked a hotel. I'm going to Liverpool this September, not actually for the Labour conference, fringe event Graham Hughes is putting on for like one day. So I've booked a hotel for that night because I'm not coming home. I'm not driving home late at night. And I'll bet you anything there's no asylum seekers in that hotel. The sort of hotel you book, right, is not that. Because that's exactly what this is. It's hotels that can't get bookings normally. Like, you know, people aren't using hotels as much in a lot of parts of the country these days. Why not use them for asylum accommodation? I mean, the reason why not is they're expensive, right? They're not 4-star hotels, but they're still more expensive than housing should be. But we've got a backlog. And it's like, what do you want them to see? If Labour doesn't find a solution such as putting asylum seekers in a tented refuge camp until their cases are heard before rehousing them, then the right-wing grievance will grow. Well, this is exactly the problem, and you can't do it because that's a concentration camp, isn't it? What you're describing is a concentration camp. So you can't do that. That's illegal, right? You can't just let them be on the street. We don't let anyone be on the street, by the way. We've got a duty to house anyone on the street. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen for asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are, you know, many are homeless. There's loads of asylum seekers that are homeless. This idea as well, because again, people get it into their heads. So they come across on the boat, claim asylum, and they go, right, we'll find a hotel for you tonight. No, they don't. They take their details and that's it. That is one of the reasons, in fact, it's probably the biggest reason, why Labour are trying to, they've got this returns agreement with France. It's like, well, you take a load of these asylum seekers and we'll take a load of yours with family links in Britain. The reason why Labour are trying to push deals, they're trying to get deals with Europe where it's like, well, we'll take the ones with family links in Britain if you can take the rest. That's what Labour ideally want, right? And the reason for that is if they've got a family link in Britain, if they've got family in Britain, they've got somewhere to stay. You presume. They presume that their family doesn't like turn them out on the street, right? You know, if you had some cousin from some part of the world that's been bombed out, of course you're going to let them use a sofa, right? So that's part of Labour's plan. If we can concentrate the asylum seekers claiming asylum in Britain to the ones with family links here, and try and reduce the number that might need, you know, accommodation because I say that in terms of asylum seekers, first of all, not all asylum seekers are poor, right? Some of them are just persecuted, or do you know what? Their home's underwater, right? Or something. So some of them can actually afford accommodation. It's not easy to get it though. They'll still need the government's help because, you know, you've got to show that you've got a right to accommodation. But some can afford accommodation. Some will have family and they can stay with them, but there's a lot of them that are not, right? Anyway, I'll catch up with some. Just a point, will council tax bills rise in reform councils? One of Reform UK leadership should answer. They have answered it, Michael. Oh, they have answered it. Yeah, because before the election, Reform UK was saying that they wouldn't be putting up their council tax, right? Oh yeah, you shouldn't be putting up council tax, shouldn't be putting up council tax. It's not what they're saying now. They've now said, oh yeah, we're going to have to do that. So yeah, Reform UK councils, they're putting up their council tax. They are putting up their council tax. Obviously, they're blaming Labour for it, but they're still doing it. How many months into a Reform UK government do we see concentration camps built on random islands around the UK? You'll never see it. You will never see it because they won't do it. Reform UK are trying to talk a good fight, but what are their policies? Ask them what their policies are. They don't have any. I did a thing last week, video, with a clip on Channel 4 News, Andrea Jenkins. She was answering questions. She was being asked about Reform UK's policies for asylum seekers and women. She didn't name a single one because they don't have any. They don't actually have any policies. They say things like, we'll not accept any asylum, but they don't say how they're going to stop it. They don't say how they're going to stop it. Like, what do they... Seriously, what's their policies on it? They don't have one. Oh, we'll take them back to France. France won't accept them. You can't invade France. It's really that simple. If you want to take them back to France, you need France's permission, right? You know, and France aren't bringing them to us, right? Those asylum seekers are coming to us, and they have a legal right to do so. Remember, it is the law, not just British law, international law that we are a signatory to. It is law that an asylum seeker can enter a country in any way they need to claim asylum. That's legal. So they call them illegal immigrants. Now, if someone passes into the UK without permission, as everyone on those boats is doing, and they're doing it for the purposes of economic migration, they're doing it to get a job, or just because, do you know what, they fancy a holiday but they couldn't get a visa, whatever it is, that is illegal. That is genuine illegal immigration, right? That's illegal immigration. But if it's for the purpose of claiming asylum, it's not. And the reason they're doing it, even Suella Braverman said that do you remember a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, she was asked by a Tory MP in the Home Affairs Select Committee. He basically got her to say, he described a generic country, he didn't name any obviously, he described a generic country where someone's been persecuted by the government, they fled fearing for their life, and they need to claim asylum in Britain. He even gave the example of someone with family links and could speak the language, so no complaints at all. And he asked her, how do they get here? And she had to concede the only way to get here would be by the small boat. That would be it. You can quite there saying, thank you for opening the comments, Phil. My fingers were always itching to type during a live stream. It's for these sort of experimental different time streams. We will see how they go. But anyway, Liam there saying, Phil, I've noticed in the last few Fridays agenda shows you do that. So many people don't get what you're trying to say with everything, mate. It's just how it is sometimes. Never confuse far-right racist NIMBYism with people's fears of hundreds of strangers suddenly being foisted on a community without consent or it being explained to them. It's the underhandedness grating. But in a hotel, right, I get that, but not with a hotel. That doesn't make sense with a hotel, what you've just said, because a hotel exists for the purposes of short-term residents, doesn't it? That's what a hotel is for. You have a hotel, like imagine a big hotel, 300 rooms, whatever. That would be a big hotel, but you know, you get them. Big tower block hotel, right? 300 rooms. It's for the purpose of 300 transitory people who are passing through on business or on holiday on some short-term basis. So a community cannot have that concern with a hotel because the hotel exists for people who are there short-term. And let me ask you something. So imagine this hotel, right? And there's two rooms rented out to two different people, and they're both from Afghanistan. But let's say one of them is just here for a holiday, right? They're perfectly in line. They're perfectly happy with the Taliban. You know, they ain't got a problem with the Taliban government. They're living happy as Larry in Afghanistan, and they're just visiting the UK on a visa for a holiday. So they've rented out that room, right? Then next door, you've got someone from Afghanistan who's fled Afghanistan because the Taliban want to kill them because they thought their daughter should go to school, right? What's the difference? What's the difference to that local community? Like, seriously, what's the difference? One's arrived on a visa, one hasn't. They're both just there temporarily. How do you distinguish between an economic migrant and an asylum seeker if they're willing to lie and claim to be a sexual or religious minority? They have every motivation to be dishonest. You're quite right. They do have every motivation to be dishonest. But here's the thing. So if you look at the statistics, over what we often say, but you can turn this around, over half, sometimes up to 3/4 of asylum claims are granted, which means that the majority are valid. But that also means there's a big chunk that are denied. A big chunk of them are failed and they're deported. And this is why Labour have been deporting record numbers. It's not because Labour are extra brutal on it. It's because the Tories left them this massive backlog. Labour have been clearing it. It's still a long way to go, but they've been clearing it. By definition, a big chunk of them have failed their asylum claims and they're being deported. All perfectly legal. No issue from lefty lawyers, right? So answer me this: if it's as simple as just lying, if you can get your asylum claim approved because you tell a lie, why wouldn't they all do it? I mean, you might get there's the odd, because they've come all this way, right? They've worked it out. I mean, you imagine if you go to Central Africa for a holiday, you do some research, don't you? You can bet your bottom dollar that people who are travelling from Central Africa or the Middle East or wherever they're fleeing from to the most northern part of Britain, Britain, you can bet your arse they've done a lot of research into the asylum system, right? Why wouldn't they all just tell one of these? Like, why isn't there just a fact sheet? Here are the 5 lies you can tell to get your asylum claim approved. It doesn't work. So I get how some people could think, oh, but some of them will just lie about, their sexuality or their religion and stuff and get it. But if it was as simple as that, everyone would do it. So it's clearly not as simple as that. I can't go through with you in granular details exactly how officials determine whether someone's asylum claim is valid or not. I can imagine there are certain situations where it's really obviously valid. Because, for example, if you are from Afghanistan and the government know you're on a Taliban hit list, then yeah, your claim's probably pucker, right? And I can also get how there'll be some claims that are really quite difficult to assess. But we clearly have a system for doing it, even if I'm not an expert on it. We clearly have a system for doing it because a large number, although the majority succeed, which means the majority are valid, a large number fail, don't they? I mean, they're saying, I've expressed concern Reform UK will probably form a government at some point. How do I see that panning out if once they're in power? I see it. What I would do is I would start off the model I would suggest is the United States under Donald Trump. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly like that. There's going to be 2 main differences, I think, but I think MAGA is the template. But I think there are 2 main differences, one in favour of us and one against us. The one in favour of us is not just that we have human rights laws in this country that America don't really. America have sort of constitutional freedoms, but when you look at them, they're not really human rights laws. They're selective. They're highly selective. And there's a highly selective Supreme Court selecting them, right? So America doesn't really have human rights laws. I think it thinks it does because of its constitutional rights, but we are seeing that people don't get those constitutional rights defended by the courts all the time. Whereas in this country we do. And although Farage talks about leaving those human rights laws behind, and he may well intend to do that, by the way. In fact, I've got no doubt he does intend to do it. It won't be easy. Because this Reform UK government, I will point out that Boris Johnson tried to get rid of them. He put Dominic Raab in charge of the project to get rid of the European Convention on Human Rights. That was already supposed to happen, right? The Conservatives were already going to do that. It was in the manifesto and everything. Didn't do it. Why? Because it's not that easy. They put Dominic Raab in charge of it, and he messed it up because he's an idiot, right? Even though he's a lawyer, and he's a human rights. Do you believe that? He's a human rights lawyer. Dominic Raab, by profession, is a human rights lawyer. Incredible, isn't it? But he's also an idiot. So that stupid evil worked in our favour. So the same will probably happen with Reform UK. It won't be as easy as they think it is, right? They'll blame the woke blob. I'm sure they will, but it still won't happen, or it won't happen quickly. So, yeah, in our favour, we have human rights laws and we have an independent judiciary, not a politically appointed. That's another thing Boris Johnson wanted to do. He wanted to have politically appointed judges, just like in America. Didn't do that. Arguably, COVID tripped him up a little bit. That probably cost him a year or so. I mean, yeah, maybe if he'd had more time, he might have done more of this, but he wasn't able to do it. The thing that works against us, however, is the UK. I mean, I often describe it as a federal country without a federal infrastructure. America has a federal infrastructure. So although you've got hideous abuses of power in the Republican states, there are democratic states where, you know, you've got some pushback against central government. We don't have that in this country. We don't have that. So Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, or just reform UK in government, I mean, wouldn't have to be Nigel Farage in charge of it. Depends when it happens, right? He's going to be in his 70s in 10 years' time. But whatever, a reform UK government, within, you know, as long as it behaves legally, has more power than, in theory, the federal government in America. Which is why Trump is having to throw his weight around and basically, I mean, that's where Trump is benefiting from the political judiciary. If America had an independent judiciary, Trump wouldn't be getting away with half this shit. Because he's not actually technically as powerful as the Prime Minister is in this country. So yeah, the government would be more powerful than the American government, legally speaking, but they would have to stick within legal lines, because otherwise the courts do have the power to enforce. It's not like Trump's ignored court rulings, right? You can't do that as easily here, because there's not going to be a situation where the Prime Minister says, well, you can't arrest me because I'm in office, like happened in America. Oh, well, we can't arrest a sitting president. There's none of that in this country. If the Prime Minister did something wild, the Prime Minister could actually, it would be a big thing, don't get me wrong. No court would do it lightly. But the Prime Minister could absolutely be arrested and imprisoned for contempt of court. It would be a big move. But if you had a Prime Minister who absolutely wanted to run roughshod over the law, then it could happen. So that's how I would see it. I would say you look at MAGA America as the template, but you have to factor in, we have human rights laws. So the concentration camps, no. Basically, a Reform UK government, a year into a Reform UK government, will still have asylum seekers. We'll still have asylum seeker accommodation. They won't all be out on the streets. I'm not saying that life won't be much, much worse for asylum seekers. They will make it very, very uncomfortable. They will remove resourcing. They will do all sorts of things, but they won't actually be able to stop it. And just like in America, ordinary people will not find themselves with better access to doctors. In fact, it'll be worse, because people are going to experience better access to doctors over the next few years. Reform UK will reverse it. They will reverse it. That's actually one thing they probably will be able to get away with, privatising the NHS, because for that, that's an easier process. You just change the system. It'll still be a complex thing, but Reform UK will be able to physically hire someone to work on legislation to privatise the NHS. They'll just be able to hire someone to do that. Whereas they can't hire someone to solve an asylum problem that has no legal solution. Only they're saying we have to make the word legitimate stop meaning any feelings based on prejudice, no matter how deeply felt, and start meaning evidence-based appraisal of fact. Yes, I mean, I'm actually going to say we need more of a pushback in general. I would say there are people really standing up and calling out this nonsense. Like you've got Zoe Gardner, for example. I think she was on Newsnight last night trying. So you do have people that are trying to push back. You've got lawyers who push back as well. What we don't have is political or media pushback against this. We don't have a concerted... And when I say media, I'm not just talking about the mainstream media, because that's mostly Tory, right? I mean, even mainstream media. You know, there's a lot of people who claim to be left-wing progressives. and have a sizable audience, and they don't talk about this stuff. The only time they talk about this stuff is if they've got, if they want to sort of push some hate against someone, usually that's quite close to them or whatever. Like, where's the big platforms calling this out? Where are they? I'm not seeing it. And so I want to go over another one. Right, let me show you this one. So this is also, this is in the news today. Has anyone seen this? Hold on, let me just put it up. A little clip of it. So this is from there's an article in The Guardian on it, but this is a clip of a granddad playing with his granddaughters, right? And you can just see, if I just play this little clip here, right? And you can even see, actually, let me just put it up properly. Hold on, because I'm missing something on it. Oh, no, hold on. Sorry, hold on. That is actually the media thing. Now I'll back as I was. The Guardian added that title. Where's it gone? Oh, there it is. Right, sorry, I'd lost it. So you can see at the bottom, so they've nicked this off a family TikTok, and it says "Happy Family Days Out with Lily and Rosie, #twin love," right? So that's their granddad playing with them. Tommy Robinson puts this out with, where's the comment? Hold on, let me find it. Something like, you know, where are the parents? Where are the parents in this? What he's seen, right, is he's seen a couple of black fellas with a couple of white girls and go, oh, what's going on here? Oh, groomies, paedophiles, right? It's the granddad and like uncle or something. And this has been demonstrated, this has been proven. That man now has had a load of, it's not just that Tommy Robinson's put out some race bait online, that there's real world consequences. He now cannot leave his house. He's a musician, right? Apparently his management team dropped him over it because they just believed the nonsense. He had to get his local MP to write a letter to them vouching for him and saying, no, this is what you've heard is all lies, right? But he's still, and his partner, they're trapped in their home because every time they go out, they're met with threats. They're met with threats. And Tommy Robinson, right, you can imagine how he made a mistake because he's a racist, right? He's a racist. He sees black man with white girls and think, oh, he's up to no good. Instead of just, maybe, I mean, you know, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think, oh, he's probably their granddad, but he is their granddad. He is their granddad. And when this was pointed out, so for all the Tommy Robinson supporters, you know, he's just telling the truth. No, he's not telling the truth. He's a liar. When this was pointed out, someone who tells the truth would take it down. They'd go, sorry, I made a mistake. It was a stupid mistake to make in the first place because he's just playing with children, right? Someone making a genuine mistake, though, whatever the reason for it, even if it's a mistake born of racism, if they've made a mistake and pointed it out, if they're at least honest, because you get honest racists, if they're at least honest, would go, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Sorry about that. They'd take it down and they'd put out a tweet going, sorry, I made a mistake about that. Turned out it was their granddad. He hasn't. He's doubled down on it. Why has he doubled down on it? Because all he wants is engagement and money. It's all he wants. That's it. Farage and Tommy both in England currently, yeah, and not under police caution, right? That man's life is ruined. He can't leave his house, right? Tommy Robinson's okay, yeah, he's also been investigated for a crime, but he did beat a fella up, right? Allegedly, although there's footage that he did. I don't think anyone's denying he beat the fella up. I think the only issue is, you know, was it apparently defence or whatever? But that man's innocent. He's playing with his granddaughter, Summer, right? Summer is doing the parents a favour. They're probably at work. He's just taken them out for some play. Nice grandparent thing to do. Yeah, I mean, look at him for goodness sake. That is like, and his life has now been ruined. Damage has been done to him. If he were rich, right? This is what pisses me off. I'm just going to get rid of it. No, I'll leave it up there for a minute. This is what pisses me off. If he were rich, right, what would he be doing right now? He'd be taking Tommy Robinson to court for defamation. Because he's been, I mean, does anyone doubt he's being defamed? For defamation, it's not enough that someone says something untrue about you, of course. We know that. You know, we're not a litigious society. But there's various barriers. First of all, the harm has to be real. You have to have done real. How can you? His management company dropped him, right? So that's financial harm. Can't leave the house because he's facing threats. That's psychological and financial harm, because if you can't leave the house, how do you earn money, right? And also, the person who made the false claim has to have had no good reason to have made it. He had no good reason to have made it, no good reason at all. And when it was pointed out that he got it wrong, he still didn't take it down. So if that man were rich, he could be taking Tommy Robinson to court and he would win. Obviously, Robinson would have to declare bankruptcy again, so he would have to pay him, right? Because he doesn't like paying people who successfully sue him for defamation, does he? We've seen that one before. But there we go. But what upsets me, because you're not going to appeal to the better nature of Tommy Robinson. You're not going to say to Tommy, come on, mate, this isn't on. Take it down. You're not going to do that. He's not going to do it. Don't appeal to him. Why can't we appeal to the country? Why is the country allowing this? Why is our legal and political system allowing that man to be a prisoner in his own home and Tommy Robinson make money out of it? Because Tommy Robinson would love it, by the way, if there were a legal check. He'd love it if this man did take him to court, because then he'd have to go on to his thing. Oh, I need more money for legal fees. You know, this fella's taking me to court. Look, he's black. Give me money, right? So he'd love it. He wouldn't love the payout at the end of it, but again, he would just claim he's got no money again, wouldn't he? Utterly ridiculous. That's the real two-tier. That's the two-tier system we have in this country. That innocent people like that have their lives ruined, and the progenitors of the lies get to, I'm not even just saying get to walk free. They get to make money out of it. They're making money out of it. Tommy Robinson is like gathering more support as a result of this. Where did this happen? So this is in if I read it, hold on. North Yorkshire, red car. It says here. I'll put up, I'll have to remember to put this in the thing for people not watching it live later, but I'll put a link in the chat for the actual article. I'll get rid of it now. But, I mean, so this is what's really upset me today. You've got, yeah, Mick saying their lies spread fast. In fact, this is the problem as well. But the problem is the facts aren't chasing it at all, really, because if Tommy Robinson puts that out, I haven't even bothered to check how many views it got. It'll have got a crap load of views, right? If he then deleted it and put up a retraction saying, oh, sorry, it was actually their granddad, that wouldn't get half as many views. Why? Because Tommy Robinson posting the original thing going, what the hell, man, where are the parents? Gets shared and shared and shared and shared and shared, right? He puts out a retraction, sorry, I got it wrong. Not many people are going to share that, really. Few people might, not many. So that won't get as much traction. So even if he went, oh, sorry, actually, I made a mistake there, I didn't mean to, then way more people would see the original lie than the truth. But he's not even trying to get the truth out there. So the truth hasn't even put its shoelaces on yet. I mean, yeah, okay. There's an article in The Guardian. I don't think there's a lot of crossover between Guardian readers and people who fall for Tommy Robinson's propaganda, right? So the Guardian article, good on them. It's drawn my attention to it, but it's not helping to counter the lies. I'd argue that red car's T-side instead. I'm not going to argue. I don't really know. But it says red car anyway. Whatever. I don't know. I'm not an expert on exactly where the administrative lines lie up there. sort of between. But it's absolutely heartbreaking. Like, you know, he and his wife. If it had been her playing with them, they wouldn't have had a problem because she's white, right? But, you know, because he was the one who went out playing with them, he's now trapped in his home. It says here, scared to leave their house because of the threats. We haven't gone outside at home, we just can't. That's Natalie saying it, his wife. Just after it started to go viral, someone in the local pub recognised him. Immediately, we couldn't believe how quick it had spread. We were walking home from shops, just streets from our house. Two lads passed us, spun round, said, I hope you're not them off that video or coming back to slash you up. How awful is that? Right? The people spreading these lies should be imprisoned. Do Robinson supporters have the intellectual capacity to read The Guardian? Maybe not, but it doesn't really matter. They're not going to. They're not interested in reading it at all. Is Tommy Robinson trying to get a position in Trump's cabinet? No, he just wants money. That's all he wants. I mean, he's like Nigel Farage. They're both racist. They're genuinely racist. It's not, but ultimately they're grifters. They just want money. Like Nigel Farage ultimately just wants, he just wants someone to give him, he wants to live the life of a millionaire. He is a millionaire, but he needs more money to feed it. The standard of living he wants is higher than he can afford with the money he has. So he needs to constantly have money coming in. So he's a grifter. Same with Tommy Robinson. Like they're both genuine racists, but they're mostly motivated by their desire to have money. Family and people I care about have fallen for the racist propaganda. I'm not that clever enough to debate them other than facts to check out. I mean, really, it is difficult because there are, and this is what I said at the beginning, I absolutely accept there's a lot of people falling for this stuff that are decent enough people and they're falling for lies, right? And I get it. Like you go back to the Asylum thing. I totally get how they can see it because they see people coming across the channel and thinking they're not following the proper procedures. It's because they think there are proper procedures and there aren't. There aren't. There are for some country, like we have safe routes for very specific situations. People just assume that the government know which areas of the world are unsafe and they have systems for everyone from those. We don't at all. We honestly don't. We don't even have it for Afghanistan. Like, who seriously thinks Afghanistan is a safe country, for Christ's sake? Like, I saw a photo, I think it was the education minister, when the Taliban took over, the education minister on his desk in his office has a pissing rifle on the desk. Not just like on a gun rack or something there. On his pissing desk, on his papers, posing for the photographs. Who's going to suggest that Afghanistan is a safe place to live? But we don't have a safe route for people from Afghanistan to claim asylum. So it's utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. But anyway, what I'm saying is I get it. For people who don't realise that, and most people don't realise the details of the asylum system, they just see a load of people and they think to themselves, these people don't think they can get through the system fairly, so they're doing it unfairly. And in this country, right, I have to tell you, if you're not from Britain, we do hate queue jumpers. I saw a post office manager nearly lynched in Leeds a few years ago for letting someone jump a queue. Oh, the people were right upset with them. You have to be careful in Leeds, they're a bit feral. But, you know, we in this country, the queue is sacrosanct, right? It's not in every country. In this country, you queue, and you queue properly. You don't cut queues. Even saving a place for someone is dodgy. You'll get a lot of dark looks if you even do that. But the idea of actually just cutting into a queue, yeah, that's not happening. So it feeds into that. And then they get told that they come straight out and they're put into a hotel, and it's like, well, it is a fact that people are coming across on a boat, which is unauthorized. It is a fact that some asylum seekers are in hotels. So why wouldn't you believe it? Why wouldn't you believe that people are just coming across illegally and getting free accommodation? Why wouldn't you believe it? Because the evidence points to it. So I do get that a lot of people are falling for this, and I totally get why they would. But what I would also try and appeal to those people is to see the ones who are pushing this onto you, this narrative onto you, are making a lot of money from it. And do you not think that's maybe their motivation for doing it? They're making a lot of money from it. They're asking you for money. They're always Tommy Robinson is constantly asking you for money. Constantly. Like, how does he afford to live his expensive? And he boasts about other houses he owns and stuff like that. Big posh houses, posh foreign holidays for months on end. You know, how does he afford all that? He's written a book, right? He ain't getting enough royalties to afford all that lot. It's your donations that are supposed to be for something else. Your donations are supposed to be for his campaigns or, you know, his legal fees. His legal fees are next to not. He doesn't actually have that much in the way of legal fees because he keeps admitting guilt anyway. Don't need a lawyer if you're going to admit your guilt anyway. But anyway, we'll have to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. I've gone on longer than I intended to. The question is, who's the owner of these hotels? And the second question is, why the other 9, whatever that is, better benefits and immigration policies ignored to come across the dangerous channel? Do you mean countries? So they haven't ignored them to come across the dangerous channel, right? You cannot expect one country. Like, so let's say you've got a trouble zone, right? I mean, a lot of people are coming from Africa because lots of countries in Africa are at war. There's people going around literally hacking people's arms off, right? They're not safe. And climate change is also destroying people's homes, right? So you've got refugees, a lot are coming from Africa, right? You can't expect Italy and Greece to take them all. So this idea, oh, why are they passing through all these other countries just to get to us? Some of them aren't. Some of them do have family links here, or they know about British culture, or they've got something, they can speak a bit of the language, right? Right? So some of them are coming here because it makes sense. But some of them are coming, you can't expect Greece and Italy to take them all. That is a NIMBY attitude. That is a case of thinking that because all the countries around us are stable, we shouldn't have to take anyone. Apart from anything else, we have contributed. We have contributed to the need for refugees. We have contributed to climate change. We have also contributed to political instability in Africa. Britain, not just Britain, France and other European countries as well, but Britain played its part in creating the unstable conditions while we were busy looting the continent in the days of empire that they've never recovered from since. So we are actually morally responsible for a lot of the instability, geological as well as political, in Africa. But also you cannot say the first, because I'll tell you something, right? Here, let me put this one on you, right? Let me put this one on you. So if you're going to say that the first safe countries they come to should take them all, which by the way is frankly impossible, then should that also mean if I were Prime Minister, that asylum seekers that make it to Britain, I should say Kent has to take them all. Kent has to take them all. If people don't like it, sorry, that's the first safe county they came to. Is that what we say? What would people in Kent want? Reform UK voters in Kent. Do they want, if I'm Prime Minister and I'm saying, well, hang on, that's the first safe county, what are they going to say? Do they want me to spread them around the country and get everyone to share their load, or do they want to accept them all? Do they want to accept them all? But I'll have to leave that as my last point. We'll leave it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. I will probably keep doing a few others of these of varying topics. Have a great rest of day, and until next time, I'll see you later.